Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Never Board of Trade podcast, brought to you by the Brampton Board of Trade and our amazing sponsors, the Brampton Honey Badgers. As always, I'm one of your co-hosts, Jaipaul. Vijay is away on assignment this week, and so we're very lucky to have an amazing guest with us. So joining us this week is Michael Vickers, the Executive Director of BOW, the Brampton Arts Organization. And we're going to have a bit of a conversation about what it is that BOW does, the arts economy here in Brampton, and where we think that's going in terms of how we support a more vibrant and engaged art scene here in our community. So Michael, thank you for making the time for us.
Thanks so much for having me. I feel very honored to be the first guest, I think, of this podcast.
The first one thus far,
that's amazing.
It's something that we've been wanting to do. We know people are eventually going to get bored, not of Vijay, but of my voice. So it's definitely time to bring in some fresh perspective, and we're very lucky to have you as the first.
Well, I really appreciate it. When we're talking about the business community prioritizing arts and culture, I'm glad that you've done that here by putting us first on the podcast.
Exactly. You can't say we didn't put you right at the front of the line.
There you go.
So for those who might be new to it or haven't heard of BOW before, why don't you tell us a little bit about what BOW is and quite frankly, what brings you to leading an organization like this? I think you've got yourself an interesting story as to how you ended up here and what brings you to Brampton as a community, like why you're doing the work you're doing.
For sure. Well, the Brampton Arts Organization really exists to support the local arts and culture community in a whole bunch of different ways and a whole bunch of different folks within that. So individual artists, but also arts organizations, arts collectives, creative entrepreneurs, creative businesses, really here to support them, to resource them, to elevate them, to help them professionalize the work that they're doing and to showcase all of the amazing things that are happening in Brampton. I think people don't always realize the talent that's come out of the city, whether it's Director X, Rupi Kaur, Havaya Mighty, Ian Williams, like so many talented folks that have come from Brampton. And many of those groups have said to us, if BOW had only existed when I was there, there could be 1 million more of us. So I think that's really our mission, is to just continue developing the arts and culture sector in tandem with the city and sort of start this new chapter for the arts in Brampton.
That's awesome. And what drew you to this work? Why are you here in Brampton?
Well, I think the opportunity for me was, how often does the city get to build an arts organization from scratch? So many cities have these long good or bad relationships with their arts councils, with their arts organizations. But for me, it was getting to start at the very beginning to build foundation blocks for something that can long outlive me, hopefully, and grow and evolve over time. But to really get to build something, which is just something that I've always enjoyed in my career, is like building things and setting them up and getting the machine sort of in place. So
I love how you characterize this somehow as it's less complicated because we don't have a whole bunch of existing organizations, which in some way is probably true. But I imagine there's a lot of other complications in a place like Brampton, like the diversity, the youth, the newcomer population, the fact that we don't have a lot of tradition. You cited off some big names like a Rupi Kaur or, but who succeeded almost in spite of a lack of arts infrastructure in Brampton. So it's complicated, maybe not in the ways that you're describing the traditional, the city has traditional arts organizations, but it's no less complicated here in Brampton.
For sure. I think
you did not take an easy job, is what I'm saying.
No, but I like a challenge. But I also think all of those complications are what makes Brampton so amazing too, right? So you're right that it is extremely diverse. There are many different communities. It's very young. It's very emerging. Like those all sound like really great things to me too, right? Because the opposite of being young, diverse, ambitious, emerging is like stagnant, old, not diverse, And so I'd much rather be on our side in Brampton, where we have all of this amazing stuff happening. I think some of it for a long time was just like a little bit more in the shadows. So how do we bring all of this into the light, bolster it, support it, and sort of change the perception of arts and culture in Brampton, which I think for a long time was sort of a nice to have, but really highlighting the fact that arts is a huge economic driver, is a huge driver for tourism, is extremely important for the business community, and sort of changing that perspective, I think, as well.
Hey folks, it's Jaipaul again. I just want to say thank you to the Brampton Honey Badgers for your ongoing support for the Never Board of Trade podcast, and to remind you to make sure to get out to a Honey Badgers game. A next great one to check out if you've got the time is July 3rd. we'll be partnering with the Honey Badgers as well as a number of other business organizations, the Downtown BIA, the Business Entrepreneur Center, to have our event called Business Before Basketball. And this is an opportunity to come out, make some connections, do some networking in advance of the game. The seating area is in the VIP section at one of the ends of the court, where you have a great, cool view of the players right in front of you. There'll be food, there'll be drinks, there'll be refreshments, lots of great people to connect with. And then you can hang out in the VIP section to watch the game, or go to your seats if you want to get a more traditional view, but an opportunity to take in the team. They've had a great run the last couple of games. The game's been fantastic and exciting, and this is an awesome opportunity not just to come out yourself, but if you've got some folks on your team, a prospect, a customer of yours that you want to bring out for a great night out and show them some fun stuff in Brampton, bring them to the game as well. So make sure you come out, make sure you sign up some folks from your team, make sure you sign up someone else who you'd like to have experience a great evening in Brampton, and we'll see you on the 3rd with our amazing sponsors for this podcast, the Brampton Honey Badgers. And I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that. Like, you've done some really interesting programming over the past couple of months, working with chambers in the form of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
I know you've participated in other initiatives as well to really try to demonstrate the value of the arts economy to a city's larger economic activity and the types of jobs it can create and so forth. You want to share a little bit about what you've been doing, what you've been learning?
For sure. I mean, I think one of the great things about Brampton Arts Organization is that we are also part of this coalition, the Canadian Arts Coalition, the Alliance of Arts Councils of Ontario, and now working with the Chamber of Commerce to sort of advocate on a larger stage about the impact that arts actually can have on local economies. So, we know that every dollar that's put into the arts spits out $25 for local revenue and the local community. Your average arts tourism guest to a city, spends something like double somebody who isn't there for arts and culture, right? So just like reframing that for people and saying, it's actually very important that people come out to shows, to concerts, to art exhibitions, because they'll spend more money, they'll go out for dinner, they'll, while they're there, go check out something else, and like just reframing things sort of as a, the arts as a cute fluff sort of thing. I think also part of that is also reminding folks that even if you don't think about it as arts and culture, like if you love Netflix at the end of the day, you're not going to have Netflix if there aren't any writers. There's no museums if there aren't any painters making that work. Even if Netflix isn't your thing and you go home and read a book at the end of the night, again, you need somebody to be illustrating those graphic novels, writing the stories. So like, it could be so easy to forget that at like the very core of our existence, like arts is what matters, right?
Absolutely.
And that aside from just the economic impact of the arts, talking about things like wellness, right, and health, the huge impacts that has on, on your well-being and your like quality of life. I think in Brampton, often when we talk about the business community supporting different initiatives, a lot of the time it goes to healthcare, right, and the need for more, health facilities and supports like that. But it's like, actually, you can be very proactive, and people won't need to go to the hospital if they're maybe engaging more in the arts and instead of other activities. Same with safer streets. If you want safer like communities, actually like get people into art, and they won't be doing bad things.
Sure.
Which, beautification. Sorry, I feel like I'm really kind of like, on my hill here talking about it all. But I think it's really important for people to realize too, right? If you want a downtown that looks beautiful, well, you need art. And for art, you need artists, and if they all leave, you're not going to get any. You're not going to get any music or murals or anything else.
No, I totally hear it. And for us, like at the Board of Trade, that's always been that line that we're trying to walk, is that to have a successful and thriving business community, you have to have a healthy and vibrant community that feels safe, that is engaging. Because where else are your customers going to come from? Where else are your employees going to come from? Where else are your suppliers going to come from? If they're not happy and wanting to move to the town that you're in, you don't have a business anyway.
1,000,000%.
So your comment about the the $1 in, $25 out, and I appreciate you getting into some detail there. I think it's easy sometimes when people talk about those types of metrics it just feel like data. But you're right. Like, what does that $25 look like? It looks like parking. It looks like meals. It looks like, and now you're creating a job for the server in that restaurant who is there because you came out on the night of that concert, and so on and so on. But to your point, it's also safety if young people have something to do. It's also about vibrancy if people feel comfortable in that community. It's also, and I think your comment about health is an interesting one. We are really good at investing in treatment, and we were very bad at investing in prevention.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to the more obvious physical health elements, we're getting a little bit better at that. People understand the relationship between diet and exercise, for instance, and like heart disease. I think it's interesting now that we're talking much more openly in society about things like mental health than we have in the past, that perhaps we'll start to talk about art in the way that we used to talk about going for a run, or getting some other form of exercise in.
1,000,000%. And I think people also can have this idea of an artist and think, they picture a Van Gogh, and they picture, maybe somebody who's struggling, not well, never sees success in their lifetime. And it's like, how do we reframe that idea of an artist to actually be something where the artist is healthy, happy, living a full life, resourced, successful,
has both ears,
has both ears. Exactly, though, right? And like reframing that. And I think for a lot of people also, they picture an artist, they aren't thinking about like their aunt that loves to maybe do quilting, or their brother that likes to make music, and so I think for people to realize that actually you have a huge amount of artists in your life too. And just again, I think if you imagine a world without art, then it suddenly becomes very apparent how important art is to your daily life. And for Brampton to be a city that not only keeps up with our neighbors, but eventually surpasses them, right, is really important.
For sure. And you're not from Brampton originally. So when you came into the role and you were working within the city initially to help get BOW incubated and then launched into the community, tell me a little bit about like you coming to Brampton. What did you learn? Like what's opened your eyes here in this community? Was there something that you were surprised to discover? Because art's not new to you, but this community is.
Yeah. I mean, I think I am still exploring Brampton, and I've worked here for 4 years, and I don't think I will ever. I mean, I think that's the amazing thing about our city is it's so huge. You go from one ward to another, and it's completely different. And there are just so many amazing things. You can be, in downtown Brampton near City Hall, and then you can go to a strip mall somewhere and have the best food you've ever had in your life. And then you can go to PAMA and see a really great exhibition, and like every sort of part of the city is so different. I think something that surprised me was just how, like the ambition, like even people haven't been beaten down by the fact that there hasn't been as much support as we would like for the arts. They're still dreamers, and they're still excited and still believe in Brampton, and are proud to be from Brampton. And to change, obviously anything bad is what you hear on the news, but actually like there's a ton of amazing things happening here, and it's been great to see the city start to really invest and nurture that.
And why do you think we've had that? You described it like there hasn't always been support here. What do you attribute that to? Is it been a lack of, to your point, the understanding of the impact of art? Has there been more systemic issues? Is it what hasn't clicked traditionally? What's the problem that you're trying to solve right now?
I think it's not just a Brampton specific problem. I think it's like a Canadian problem with not realizing the value of the arts. And I think that's changed. I think a big thing with the city was creating the new Culture Master Plan in 2018 that really said, okay, time to start a new chapter. And, the creation of Brampton Arts Organization was one of the key actions within that. It's amazing to see now a new Arts and Culture Center coming in 2028, which is a really big statement, I think, by the city saying we're going to build a multi-million-dollar new facility to support arts and culture. But as to like why, I mean, I think the thing with cities is that leadership can change constantly, right? As you know, and there could be a different term of council, and I'm sure that like many cities, there can be these things that are in motion, and then something shifts, and priorities, right? I think it's it's not lost on me either that when you're running a city, there's so many different competing priorities, and it's also not lost on me either that healthcare is a real issue, housing, like these are all things, but I think it's important to realize that they're all interconnected and they're not separate, and the arts is a big piece of that puzzle too,
for sure,
and just as important as any of the other sort of departments or divisions or anything like that.
And for me, that's really among the reasons I like the work here at the Board of Trade is that there's a whole bunch of things we get to do here. But one of the things I really like when it comes to my interest in supporting the community and how it grows is the recognition that unlike terms of council and unlike competing priorities from the city, that the business community and our resident communities are much more constant. They're not
Yeah.
in the cycle of every 3 years I gotta run for my seat again.
Hmm.
Every 4 years I might change, and suddenly you're dealing with a whole bunch of new cast of
Yeah.
characters. My hope is that, and among the reasons I like this job at the Board of Trade, is my hope that in working with some of these institutional entities, companies who've been here 50, 60, in some cases we have members who have been in Brampton for over 100
Yeah.
years, that I don't have to worry that their priorities are going to change because there was a municipal election.
Yeah.
They have their own pressures and priorities for sure, and they have their own
Yeah.
economic circumstances they need to deal with. So it's not like it's a constant in terms of their capacity to support. But I don't often worry about their capacity philosophically in the way that you're describing.
Yeah.
I wonder if you see that same opportunity to start building more bridges with the corporate community here in Brampton.
Yeah.
And what does that look like in your mind? Where have you seen that really be successful?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the light bulb is starting to go off in Brampton's business community, and I think that there's just such an opportunity for the business community and the arts community to work together. And I think sometimes there can be almost like a language barrier between the two different communities, along with the idea of maybe the business community picturing what an artist is, and maybe the artist community also picturing what a business person
100%,
is.
100%.
And picturing somebody in a suit.
I always take off my tie before I come to one of your events.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? And it's and I always put on a suit jacket when I come to one of your events. But it's just like finding that middle ground where it's actually like we're not so different, you and I, business people and arts people, and how do you work together?
But and where do you see those intersections? Like I think for a lot of people, they see it because and I bring it up because a lot of the listenership and viewership of this are our members, small businesses.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us, when we see businesses engaging with the arts, it's one of two or three ways.
Yeah.
And it's often I'm in a lobby of some really important feeling office, and they may have some a group of seven or Tom Thompson thing on the wall, some Canadiana painting.
Yeah.
Or it's I think like a TIFF thing, right? Like it's a major corporate sponsor around the festival, and it's around exposure. Yeah. But that's not the only two ways that it's going to be. It's not just patronage and buying art, and it's not just like slap a logo on a thing. How do these smaller businesses or businesses who are embedded in the community, what relationship do you want to have with them?
I mean, I think that there's so many different ways that a business can interact with the arts, and I think you touched on something there about exposure, right? And so one thing I would just encourage all businesses to remember is just that exposure is great, but it's not going to put food in an artist's fridge. And we all know that groceries are super expensive right now. So I think that, the first thing I would say is when we spoke about language barriers, like sit down with an artist that maybe you're interested in working with and see what opportunities can come from that. I mean, I think supporting organizations, and obviously I have a bias here, but supporting the organizations that are supporting the other artists are super important too, right? Yeah. So I think there is this idea of, well, we could support the arts by buying one $5,000 painting. Yeah. Whereas my argument would be, well, that $5,000 going toward Brampton Arts Organization can put, X number of artists into workshops for free, can get them a studio in our studio program, can, help them learn how to build a website and build a business. Yeah. I think also just to say, I think we've talked now about the business community and the arts community as, two different things, but also everyone remembering that like artists are small businesses. Yeah. And I'm really proud of a lot of the work that Brampton Arts Organization has done with Brampton Entrepreneur Centre Beck. And I think for them and us, like realizing we're not so different, you and I, and creating new opportunities for those folks. But I think also teaching local artists and arts organizations to get involved with the Board of Trade is super important too. Again, that you're a small business. If you want to have a long career in the arts, you also have to run yourself like a business. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a ton of ways for businesses to engage with the arts. For us, we have different groups like developers. Daniel's Callow have been two amazing developers that realize, like we were saying, that if you want folks to be interested in Brampton, it needs to be a place where arts is happening, that artists are doing things, and it's sort of that old idea, which remains true, that if you want, cool stuff to be happening, you need artists around. And to the point that you touched on, if you want businesses to open up an office in downtown Brampton, well, once it hits 5 o'clock, they're going to need something to go do or see or go get a beer somewhere, right? Yeah. And those companies are going to look at areas and say, well, our workforce doesn't really want to be there, or not, right? So I think, reframing those sorts of things.
No, I think it's a real challenge. And I think, one of the things that's always a topic here in Brampton is the revitalization of the downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this is the case study in why we need an arts community and why we need, quite frankly, a hospitality community as well,
Yeah.
that sees the value and feels the embrace of the community to get involved, because we want to attract more businesses here. I've lived in Brampton 22 years.
Yeah.
The entire time I've been here, the conversation always has been, how do we revitalize this downtown? And we've seen progress. I don't want to suggest that nothing has happened, but no one has cracked that nut. And I think a big part of it is because we've looked at it in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah.
We've not looked at it in terms of engagement and activation. And you and I were joking before we started recording, about the types of spaces we need. And you made the point, right? Like, artists don't need. We want good spaces. We want functional spaces, but we don't need the shiny, the glittery, the whatever. It doesn't have to be a lot of infrastructure. It just needs to be space that can be activated and allow for people to create within. And that alone can start to revitalize the broader space around it if it feels like there's some energy coming into it.
1,000,000%.
Talk about space.
Well, I mean, space is just always, no matter what city I think you go to in Canada, and Brampton is no exception to that. Like, space is the number one thing that artists need, is just like a place to be able to go make work. To be with community. That's the thing that we always hear from folks too, is like, number one, I want to meet other artists, to be with other artists. And it's pretty amazing. I'd encourage folks to look up, like, meanwhile leasing is something that's been done in all of these major cities for a very long time. So if you're wondering, like, why does Montreal have the arts community it has? Why does New York, Berlin, like, why do these cities have such amazing arts and culture? It's because they give artists cheap space, and cities look at, how do we make sure we do that, even if it is on this. So meanwhile leasing is really this idea of, while a building is sitting there not doing anything, let's activate it. And it can all be very transparent. It's, this building will become something else in a few years, but for now, let's give it to the arts community. And that was a lot of the work that I did with a nonprofit that I was with before called Akin, where we would again work with Daniels, Allied REIT, large property developers who would also say, I have beautiful space in, the financial district in Toronto, but it's just sitting there empty. We'd rather, create a social good, activate the space. I mean, I think something to remember as well, like, the best way to maintain a building is to keep it in use.
Yeah, absolutely. As we're seeing right now in the downtown of Brampton, a whole block is being torn down.
Yeah.
And among the reasons why is because it sat in disuse for so long that the city made the determination it would be cheaper to just tear them down than try to rehabilitate them, because disuse, to your point, results in the whole asset basically deteriorating.
Yeah, misuse through disuse, like leaving it and neglecting it, right? And I think, and what a shame. Yeah. And I think it's just like, how can we now be proactive in how we're looking at incorporating, making use of buildings and infrastructure that's already there? How do we look ahead to things like the Arts and Culture Center, like we said, but not being afraid to move arts into a community? And again, that's what people actually want, ways to attend a workshop, to look at something beautiful, to engage in something. And that's my hope too. The Arts and Culture Center will be amazing, but how do we also incorporate the arts into every new development? Right? And you're seeing that in other cities, and again, cities like Toronto, Montreal, and others. That has to also happen at the policy level, where you change the rules so that in Toronto, for example, they have a nonprofit rent policy where they'll give city-owned space to nonprofits for $2 a year.
Right. Oh, wow.
And they just made that commitment, right?
Sure.
Like, it sounds shocking, and it's like, well, that's happened for a long time because they realize the value of nonprofits, including the arts.
And we do have requirements like that. I just don't think we've applied them to the arts, right? So, like, if one is building a new housing development here in Brampton, for instance, there's a certain requirement for green space. There's a certain requirement for walkability. There's certain requirements for certain lifestyle conditions. We've established that actually fall on the builder. To make not just a bunch of houses, but to make a community that's livable.
Yeah.
So to your point, we have the language, we have the precedent.
Yeah.
We've just not extended this idea of livability to include arts and culture in the same way we think about green space and trees and so forth.
1,000,000%. And on the business end, like, I would say for you business folks that are listening, like, other cities have tax breaks, incentives for including arts and culture. So, some of the groups that we would work with as well, Toronto has the co-location property tax subclass, which people just call colo. But if you look that up, as a business owner, if 50% of your building, at least I believe it is, include arts and culture shared use providers, you get a massive tax break. And so, like, doesn't that sound good to the
Sure.
business community? And again, great for the arts community, great for business. Everyone, like, there are ways to do that. And yeah, we see that in Brampton too. There are other incentives for the business community, or if you want to set up new office space, we're going to waive development charges, whatever it might be. All you have to do is sort of take a leap of faith and say, let's also actually like extend that to the arts.
And I think this is an interesting place for a conversation, certainly, because as we're talking about these things like development charges, for instance, and how cities are trying to incentivize certain types of development, one of the things you hear consistently is that's all well and good, and we want to create more livability, we want to create more spaces and so forth. However, the city itself has to be able to replace the income that's going to be lost. Every tax break comes at the expense of either an investment in some other area or the requirement to make up that tax in some other form of taxation. You're suggesting something here that is an incentive, in this area, has a direct economic payback. It may not be an immediate payback, but there is a direct line that you can draw.
1,000,000%.
When we talk about that, the $1 to 25, or what are other metrics? I'm sure you've got a lot of numbers you can cite. What is the payback on investment in the arts? Not the dollar amount, but the timeline. Like, if we invest that dollar today, how long does it typically take for us to start to see that return on investment?
Invest it today and you'll start seeing results tomorrow. And I think it's very, very quick, right? It's not one of those things either where it's like, okay, well, we're doing this because for the next generation. It's like, well, no, you put an artist into a space, next week you're probably going to start seeing cool things in the window, right? And so, and you put a musician down the street, you're pretty quickly going to have people gathering around, listening to that musician, and then being like, hey, do you want to go to that restaurant across the street? So, without sounding silly, I think like it's days, not weeks, months, years. So the sooner that everyone can act on and incorporating the arts into what they're doing, the better.
I love that. And then when you talk about arts, like, that's a really broad spectrum of what that means. So again, just for the listeners and for me, quite frankly, what are we talking about here? Obviously, there's performing arts, there's visual arts, there's writing. What is your focus in terms of BOW and when you're making the argument for investment in the arts or partnership with the arts and the business community? What's your focus there?
All of the above. So I think if anything, when you were sort of speaking about the challenges of Brampton, I think if anything for us, it's that we want to support all creatives, all arts and culture, and all creative industry. And so what that can look like, again, I think you make a very good point there where people picture the artist. Again, it's probably a painter or a performer. And so let's run through those. So it is, music, visual arts, performing arts, but also the literary arts. Brampton now has Brampton Book Week. We have amazing things like the Fold, the Festival of Literary Diversity. How do we continue those sorts of things? Filmmaking, TV production, like illustration, comics, the graphic arts, arts organizations, as far as creative industry goes, then it starts, again, reframing for people. It's like, oh, that's graphic design, that's video games, that's, AI and virtual reality, like all of those sort of things are all linked together. If you want a cool t-shirt, like fashion and all of that too, right? Like we also have a commitment to supporting those creative entrepreneurs.
And talk a little bit about that, because I think that's an interesting one, like as an intersection for the business community. I think when we think about art, we think about, it's funny, like even you went through the progression, right? You start the list with the ones I think we all assume, the painter, the dancer, the musician. And then you got into, I think, something that people in business talk about, but don't always know how to inject into their organization. And that is the idea, not of art, but of creativity. And businesses will use the language of innovation. They'll use the language of competitiveness. They'll use the language of new. But what they're always talking about is creativity. They're talking about different ways of thinking, different ways of approaching the world. We think about design a lot. I don't know that businesses always draw the line between that and the arts community, but there is that line there.
1,000,000%. And I think I would say, like, you get what you pay for, right? And so I was talking to some young startup the other day, and he said, well, why would I hire an artist instead of using ChatGPT for AI? And we could talk about AI forever too.
Oh, whenever you're ready, dude.
Okay, we'll make a space for that in a second. But he sort of said, why would I pay an artist when I can just get, and I basically said to him, you get what you pay for. Don't you know when you see something that's made by AI? Yes. Can't you, I think it was Rick Rubin, I heard on some podcast recently sort of said, well, AI doesn't really have a point of view.
Yeah.
It just sort of does what it's told, right? And
Yeah.
I think, so,
That's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it doesn't,
because that's the whole point of art. Ultimately, is to make a statement.
It's to make a statement. It has a point of view based on experience.
I really like that.
Life, on whatever the way the sun is hitting the window that day, like whatever it might be. And so I think, you can very quickly see the difference. And I think in these most, like the big major brands, I'm thinking of like Adidas puts a ton of money into the arts, right?
Yeah.
And that's why Adidas is consistently cool,
Yeah.
And I think that's the big difference, and again, you can go on Vistaprint and get a bunch of t-shirts made for sure, but don't we all know how different it feels when you get a free piece of merch at an event that was on Vistaprint compared to somebody saying, oh, actually a local artist,
I silk screened this,
screen printed this with their actual hands, and the quality, right? Then again, that's just comes back to like, you get what you pay for. And I think you get what you pay for can apply to investment in the arts. It's like, if you want to put just a little into supporting the arts community, that's all you're going to get out of it. But like, look at the cities that are putting a lot into the arts and look what's happening.
I definitely say I went to school in Hamilton, so I still have a connection to that city. Yeah, and I still have friends there. And going back for their art crawl or going back for their super crawl, where they activate the whole city. It's not the entire time, but it's like one Friday a month, or in the summer, like they do a whole weekend, and to see James North turn into a giant outdoor arts piece. That, to your point, it's everything from performing arts to people who make contraptions to people selling handicrafts that they make at home, but just seeing full creativity unleashed. You see how that whole city comes alive, and how people come from all over to take part in it. And it really drives that idea of like the identity of a city can be driven by its art scene. For sure. And that was done with intentionality, right? Like a few years ago, Hamilton came up with a whole campaign that art
said,
is the new steel.
Art is the new steel. And they
I got a t-shirt.
And they invested, and they didn't just sort of say it, but they really put the money where their mouth is. And then that's changed things, right? And then folks are leaving Toronto to go to Hamilton because art is the new steel. And it was a city that sort of stopped and said, what are we going to do? Because the world is changing, industry is changing. Like, how are we going to make use of our city and the infrastructure that we have? And now you see in Hamilton, the cotton factory, Hamilton Craft Studios, all of these amazing things popping up again in like buildings that were factories or unused. But again, ultimately it took the city making that commitment, and they could have had 100 other things be the new steel, but they said no, art is what makes sense. And like you said, then people go there for Supercrawl, go there for 100 other things. Now they're building a whole new completely renovating the stadium there, and a big part of that will also be public art. I wasn't aware of that. That's cool. And also, again, what's the stadium for is music and culture and all these other things. Again, Maddie Matheson will be doing the food there because it's all like part of the cool factor, right? And I think it's okay to be open about that too. I think it doesn't have to be this like ugly secret of like, oh, we want arts and culture because it'll make things cool and then we'll make more money. It's like, let's just be open about that. It's not a bad thing either. No, I think it allows people to understand it and get behind it more easily. Right. Well, I want to make time for do you have an AI screed? Because if you got one, I want to hear it. As someone who's involved in the arts and creative community. I just think that AI can be a tool for artists to use just like anything else. And I think, also when people started using AI more for art, they sort of said, well, actually what I'd really like is for AI to help me with my laundry and help me with doing my taxes and help me write an email so that I can focus on making art. So that's sort of where I land on it too. But I also think that AI is not going anywhere. So I guess just on the arts, and I would sort of say there's no point fighting it. I think it's just looking at how it can support folks. I mean, a lot of arts councils are looking actually at how artists can apply for grants, apply for funding by using AI. And I think that is super interesting to me, is again, not looking at it as like for making the art, but for actually supporting the artist. For folks where English is a second language, ChatGPT can help them articulate what they're trying to say about the beautiful performance that they would like funding for a lot quicker and a lot easier, and maybe cut to the chase. So I love that, and that's really the way where I see the power of it too, is its ability to level the playing field. And we see it like in a more in other business sectors. I'm realizing as we have this conversation, I need to stop talking about art is here and business is here.
You
Yeah.
are a sector of the business community, no different than if we were talking to someone who's a manufacturer or someone who's a food processor. You just happen to be representing an arts sector.
Yeah.
So when I talk to people in other sectors,
Mhm.
what we hear is how can, in the way you're describing,
Yeah.
can we utilize AI to remove the mundane and the repetitive,
Yeah.
so that people can focus on the work that is the most meaningful?
Yeah.
And how can we use it to level the playing field? And the example we hear most often is that of connecting with talent, where because we're a newcomer community, you often have people here who have skills.
Yeah.
They may even have a tremendous experience often that exceeds the job that they're applying for,
Yeah.
but they don't have the language skills or the cultural competency on day one to appear as an equal candidate or properly present what it is that they have to offer.
Yeah.
And so when you're describing that exact same scenario, but now not in the form of an interview, but in the form of a grant application, like that all resonates.
Yeah, and I think it's again just like it's can be so difficult to be an artist without the proper supports and without more investment in it. But it's even more difficult if you just move to the country, right?
Yeah.
And so I think again, there's just these larger things that need to shift, because I constantly am working with newcomer artists, and we do a lot of work to support folks that are new to the country. And they say, I went to an employment center, they offered me this job at Tim Hortons. No shade at Tim Hortons, but it's somebody who's like, I was a painting professor in India, and now I'm being told to do, because even at the business center, they're not considering a career in the arts as the same as these other things. So it's just like this larger sort of reframing that needs to happen. But yeah, I mean, in the business community, you're hearing all these stories of companies saying, well, we don't need people anymore, and they fire everyone, have AI do everything, and now
then they hire all those people back like 6 months later.
Turns out we actually need
a marketing department or
the
whatever.
Human touch, and turns out actually AI images you can tell because it's always kind of bluey orange and So I think it's the same in the arts. It's like you can be a tool for the artist's hand, but you still need the artist's hand in there, and the same way in the business community, you still need that. Again, that point of view is really sort of sums it up, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. I like that. And like, you can never go wrong with Rick Rubin, and I trust you've read his book on creativity, which is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
it be great to be Rick Rubin, right? Just this guy who just like
I mean, just to like be able to wear my hair that way. I have to put a lot of maintenance to keep this all clean, just to walk around with a giant beard, and my hair looks like whatever, and people pay a lot of money just to muse.
Yes.
And I'm sure, and for those who haven't read the book or know much about him, not only is he like obviously a genius producer who's contributed so much, he has no musical skills or abilities on his own. He cannot produce music. He cannot operate a soundboard. He basically operates in the world of vibes. And
is very upfront about that. Right?
100%.
He's very like, to be clear, I'm not a
Yeah.
So you got to respect the honesty there.
Absolutely.
But he says like, I've got a great point of view. Again, and taste, and like So.
No, absolutely. The one thing you touched on that we haven't we touched on a couple times rather that we haven't dug into a little bit is that of the diverse nature of Brampton as a community. We talk about diversity in terms of the number of types of artists that are supported by an organization like BOW or that exist here in Brampton. But one of the things that's unique about Brampton is its newcomer nature. There's lots of different populations that are here. Many people, this is their first Canadian home. And I think one of the perceptions for a lot of folks, I imagine for an arts organization, is that in spite of all the different modalities of art you've described, I imagine for most people, when they visualize who they see doing that, it's a very traditional looking face that's doing that. How is BOW working on that issue? Is that something that you're working on? How do we bring diverse people so that the face of that artist is a different? When we talk about a dancer, it's not just ballet or some form of contemporary dance, but it might be West African or Indian dance and so forth.
Well, I think like, we work a lot with the the equity team at the city to look at ways that we can sort of make a difference. And Brampton is a city, I think, like I said, I'm still learning about it, that I think was one way for a very long time and then suddenly shifted, and it's still catching up.
It shifted very fast,
right? Very quickly. And I think infrastructure, all these different things that we're talking about, it's just playing catch up. And I think that, I think for us, it's just making sure that in everything that we do, the people participating reflect the community, but also the people up on stage and the teachers that we are bringing out into the community also reflect that, right? So it's not a very diverse group of folks learning how to build a website, but the person teaching them also reflects that community. And I feel like for Brampton Arts Organization, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are like leading that charge. And I'm really proud of the work that we do in that regard. Like we were the ones with the city, like having Pride, June proclaimed as Pride Month, and therefore making remarks at the flag raising. And I think that, the artists are always the ones that sort of lead the charge as far as like progress goes, frankly, right? And so I think that's just inextricably linked, and one group's fight is our fight, and everything is sort of connected in that way. I mean, I think part of BOW's strength too is just that we are also, as a staff, all artists, and we're all makers, and we're all creatives, and all come from very different walks of life, different experiences, different ages, different ethnicities, different backgrounds. And I think because of that, then too, we can all bring that different perspective to what we're doing, and we're still learning and growing too. Also, I'd say for our organization, we host regular town halls. We have an artist advisory group that keeps us in check, make sure that we're addressing any blind spots, different things like that. But I'd say that we managed to, I think in a pretty good way, serve the community because we involve them in everything that we're doing. And it's not really this sort of us and them, like the organization and the audience or the participants, but it's like they're inextricably sort of linked in the work that we're doing.
And I think you've done a really good job of that. Like, I asked the question more so people could hear your point of view on it, but I certainly see it. I've been to your office multiple times. Obviously, you do a lot in the community. I think BOW's done a tremendous job. You mentioned, the Pride Month, but many times you mentioned Book Week earlier. Like, you've done a great job, I think, of integrating the organization into the broader community landscape through the initiatives that the city has. But then when people engage with what you're doing, the diversity of artists, the not just modalities, but the types of faces, the ages. One of the things that really strikes me, and I don't know how you all made it happen, if this was a U initiative or a city initiative, but that lovely photo mural that exists at the corner of Main and George there, or heading to Theodore Lane, I guess it's technically on that side of the street, that shows, I'm guessing it's about 20 odd faces, and really shows a diversity of people. And you sort of see a little, like, whoever you are in Brampton, you're likely to see you represented in that mural of these Brampton artists that BOW has out there. And I love that. I love that mural.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, that mural was done by a local photographer, Dusty Loops, who I recommend you check out. And I think the intention was capturing the community that we serve and that work with us. But I'm very pleased as well that it feels like you look at that mural and you see Brampton there. And I think it's just us continuing to do that work. And a project that I was really pleased that we did downtown was, which again, I think speaks to like integrating art into everything that you do. We worked with a group called Stopgap Foundation, where we offered many local businesses downtown the opportunity to have an access ramp. So you could have a ramp up to make sure that there are no barriers for entering the business. But along with that wheelchair/access ramp, it functioned as public art. So we had our local artists come in, paint the ramp. So suddenly, community beautification, accessibility, employment opportunities for the artists, paid gig for this amazing organization, Stopgap. So those are the sorts of projects that I'm like most proud of.
That's awesome. And again, just come back to that notion, right? Like I love that you're telling these stories that are allowing people to understand like how these small investments turn into like real jobs, real drivers for the economy, and all these ancillary benefits you've described of, to your point, beautification, accessibility. Like these are real investments with real returns for our community.
You get a lot of bang for your buck with the arts, to be frank, and it's not, to your point, it's the social good, it's the economic impact, it's the beauty, it's the just, and also just the intrinsic value of like the arts.
100%. Well, and while the downtown's under reformation, what I'm hoping is to see more public art get involved, right? There's so many beautiful canvases just waiting to be, having murals put up or graffiti art put up or little nooks in the downtown where I think performances could take place. I'm hoping that as you continue, that the city continues to be a good partner to you as the downtown transitions and other parts of the city transition. Because we have so many spaces that I think are just dying to be activated that we haven't taken advantage of yet.
1,000,000%. I think so. I think that the city now, like the cultural services team is amazing at the city. And I think as we continue to work with planning, with realty, with economic development, and all of these other groups too, I think you'll see more and more of that. I'm certainly hopeful. I mean, the great thing with it too is that once you put up a mural, it's pretty hard to not want it to be there forever and to have more of them, right? So I think it's just like the proof is in the pudding there. And once you start seeing these things, But I think, yeah, it has to be a bigger initiative and not just sort of like, oh, those quirky artist people over there are doing their thing.
Yeah.
How nice. It's like, actually, you got to weave that into the fabric of everything that we're doing.
100%. And I think it's one of those things where I think, it's hard for people to realize the impact it has because you really only notice it in the absence.
Yeah.
I work, this office is in the downtown. I come into downtown every day. I park on Main Street. And as a result of that, depending on how I walk from my car to the office, I walk past that photo wall that we're talking about. I may walk past the alley where the chessboards and that little, between which unfortunately is being torn down now, or I'm wrapping around the Rose Theater. And but everywhere I go, there's giant murals, there's art, there's color.
Yeah.
And I think, whether you realize it or not, that is lifting you on your way to work. And I may still have my AirPods in. I'm still listening to some music or something like that from the car. And that combination of walking to the office, or the days I ride my bike to the office, and having a coffee and seeing these beautiful things on my way in, I am sure I'm smiling at more people. I'm sure I'm coming to the office as a happier person. I don't know how you quantify that, but living in a part of the city where I have access to this, I get to see this world-class theater every day that's here in our backyard, literally from this office. It lifts you in a way that I don't know that you put a dollar figure on, but is making for a more livable and exciting community to be in.
For sure. Yeah, 1,000,000%.
Oh, for sure. So you've been really generous with your time.
Oh.
I just want to ask is if there's anything we haven't talked about or anything really important that you want to share in terms of what's coming down the pipeline for BOW or anything that you really want to draw people's attention to?
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think a couple upcoming things on July 12th, Saturday, July 12th, we are taking over the Rose Theater by doing a huge artist market. So we'll have about 30 artists, all local, each a small business there selling their wares. It'd be just a super fun day. Really great way to actually come out, support a local artist, buy some beautiful things for your home, buy some gifts, support a local business. So Saturday, July 12th, we'll have our annual artist market. We get about 2,000 people out. There'll be a whole bunch of musicians. There'll be some snow cones if you want a tasty, icy treat. It's just a really fun day. That same day is Partying the Lanes with the BIA. So it'll just be an amazing day to be downtown Brampton. And then just our ongoing workshops, programs, events. Everyone is always welcome. Everyone's invited. We do about 100 events a year.
That's amazing.
Everything we do is free. We are always welcome, contributions. We are doing a summer fundraising campaign that you'll see more of. Again, every dollar adds up for us. We're not the sort of organization where we're waiting on huge $1 million checks. Like each little check adds up. So you'll see more on that summer fundraising campaign too. But just get involved. Send us an email if you have an idea for BOW too. I think people sort of say, how do I become a member of BOW? You're already a member. Everyone's a member. You get to help decide, what we do and what's needed.
I love that. So a couple quick follow-up questions from that then. If people want to learn more, what's the website that they go to? Make sure we give the plug in.
Yeah, so our website is just bramptonartsorg.ca. We have a really great social presence, so just BAO Brampton. So if you're on Instagram, make sure you check that out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned getting involved. One of the things what we didn't talk about, but I think it would be great if you wanted to talk about real quickly, is your artist in residence program.
Yeah. So we have an artist in residence program. Speaking of space, we realized that we had more space than we needed necessarily in our office, or we could put it to better use. So we have 9 artists that each get 4 months of free studio space in our office, a small living stipend, and then we work and sort of exist amongst the community that we serve in our office space. We're hoping to expand that program. That is a program that we are looking for support for actively. 9 folks doing all sorts of different amazing things in our office, completely free for 4 months.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And you've been kind enough to give me a tour of the space, and I'm sure it's turned over even since that time with new artists.
Yeah.
But going into those spaces and seeing the things that people were working on, I saw folks painting, I saw folks crafting, I saw someone working on storyboards for a film, I saw an illustrator. It's really an inspiring space just to walk through. And I love that you have this opportunity for anyone who considers themselves to be an artist, even if they're not at a professional level yet, to have the opportunity to dive into their work and really be supported while they're building their portfolio or whatever that next big project is.
Judgment-free zone with BOW,
I like
everyone
that.
is welcome, all levels, interests and abilities.
Fantastic. And then the final question, because I can't let you not answer it. You alluded to, you said everyone on the staff is an artist of some kind.
Yeah.
What kind of artist do you identify as?
Oh, I do sculpture and painting. I have a website you can check out.
I did not know this about you.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
I've worked on different public art projects. So Yeah, I did metal sculpture for a really long time. Lately, I'm doing a bunch of drawings of flowers. Yeah, I've done a bunch of different collaborations. I've worked with film folks. So yeah, I do a whole bunch of different things. And yeah, Amanda on our team is an amazing photography artist. Gardenia works a lot in film and film festival programming. Katie does a whole bunch of different things. Karen on our team is also an amazing video artist, film artist, and Kieran is an actor, so she's in plays all sorts of the time. And yeah.
Okay, I'm so happy to do this because now I've learned more about you. I've learned more about the people in our community that I work around.
Yeah.
And I'm going to track down your sculptures and check those out as well. That's fantastic.
Thanks so much.
No, I appreciate you making the time for us today.
Yep.
This is really great. And as I shared, I think for me, recognizing arts is not a part of our community, but a sector of our business community, I think is something that I understand, but instinctively need to get better at. I hope people listening to this are inspired to learn more about how they can support the arts economy here in Brampton and get involved with BOW.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
So thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. Thank you once again to the Honey Badgers for all your amazing support. The Honey Badgers have had some good success the last couple home games. And the next couple home games coming up on the 29th, and they have a home game this coming Sunday. And on July 3rd, they have a business and basketball event, which will have a lot of folks, I imagine, from BOW as well.
Be there for sure.
The Brampton Board of Trade, the downtown BIA, Beck will all be there. So if you're a business member or just want to meet other folks in the business community, that's a great game to come out to. And thank you once again to Michael for making time for us.
Oh, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. I'll see you on the game on July 3rd.
Sounds fantastic. And if not, before then, hopefully I'll get some fishing in the summer too. Sounds like we both have an interest.
I would love that.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.